Expert Insights hosted by the IPS. Today we have Dr. Radhicka Kapoor, Senior Fellow at ICRIER from India. Dr. Kapoor, let's talk about the future of work, even now, even in the immediate future, but also more purposely in regards to the fourth industrial revolution, the 4IR. What areas should we be focused on when we talk about the future of work under 4IR?
The future of work is something that is being affected by a multitude of factors. The world of work is seeing changes not only because of technological advances which underlie the fourth industrial revolution, like artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and all of that, but also by the forces of globalisation, by climate change, urbanisation, and migration. And all these transformative changes are collectively shaping the future of jobs. They're shifting jobs across sectors, they're destroying jobs in some sectors, creating new ones in others. They're changing the kind of tasks that we undertake in existing occupations. They're changing the way people are connecting to work. They're changing the traditional standard employer-employee relationships. And most importantly, when all these changes are happening, they are not impacting all people equally. There are some people who are bearing a disproportionate burden of these changes and they stand to lose a lot. So while we are seeing changes in the labour market because of all these technologies and the other forces that I just described, we're also seeing changes in the distribution of income, and which is likely to lead to increased inequality. So I think labour market and inequality would be two key issues that we need to focus on in this discourse.
What are some of the groups of people who will be affected more adversely than others?
To begin with, traditionally, what we see is that machines, to begin with, take away those jobs where people are performing routine tasks, manual tasks. And these are essentially performed by low-skilled to medium-skilled workers. And that is what we call in the literature the hollowing out of the middle. So I think those are going to be the first jobs that will go. In fact, those jobs have already gone. There is a reasonable amount of literature to suggest that there is evidence of hollowing out this middle in South Asia as well. So I think jobs in the manufacturing sector are definitely going to be affected by this because we are adopting more capital-intensive, labor-saving techniques of production. There's some evidence of rise in use of robotics as well. So that is one sector where there's a cause for concern. But also I want to point to the fact that much of South Asia is still in the agricultural sector. And the agricultural sector is firstly going to find it difficult to employ more people, not only because once again we are going to adopt more modern techniques of production, but also because climate change is going to put more pressure on that sector. In fact, it's the small and the marginal farmers which will have to bear a disproportionate burden of this. So I think that largely it is the poor, the low-skilled, the unskilled who are going to have to bear the burden of this change. And that, I think, is an enormous challenge because we have to think through how we are going to protect these people, make this transition as painless as possible for them, because at the end, it is a moral imperative to protect these people.
One of the sectors that will be affected by this is, for example, the apparel sector, which contributes greatly to the South Asian economy, and that sector is employed mainly by females in the labor force. So does that mean that females are likely to be more affected by the displacement that occurs under 4IR? Because that also happens while at the same time there is discussion about the opportunities that it creates in terms of circumventing some of the structural issues about security and kind of distance and so on and so forth in regards to giving more opportunities to female labor force participation. So how does this balance and how does that balance get struck out in terms of the policy process?
Okay, so before getting into the gender question, I want to briefly talk about the apparel and the textile sector. Because these are really the labor-intensive sectors that are there in South Asia, and these are the sectors which are creating jobs. And I think that the pace of automation, the pace at which we're adopting these technical changes varies across sectors. And it so happens that the pace at which we're adopting these new technologies or more capital-intensive techniques of production is slower in these labor-intensive sectors like apparel and textile, as opposed to sectors like automobiles. Now, this is not to say that the capital intensity of production in apparel and textile is not rising. It is in fact rising, but it is still considerably lower than capital-intensive sectors. And all the evidence that we have of the use of robotics is again largely concentrated to sectors like the auto sector and to activities like welding. And we still don't have the kind of robots that we need to actually handle material that, and soft fabric and simple things like turning the fabric. Those are things that robots are still not being able to perform. So I think that there is still this window of opportunity in the textile and the apparel sector where we've not seen automation come in as big a way as we have seen in other capital intensive sectors. Now, the question on women, I think it's really a mixed bag, because to begin with, we know that female labor force participation is quite low in South Asia, and women are of course bogged down by the burden of family work and unpaid care work. And one way of looking at technology is that because you have all these technological improvements, they sort of reduce the drudgery of doing these routine tasks for women, so they give them more time, they give them more flexibility, so they can probably step out and participate in economic activities, provided we address all the social issues behind this cause. The other also is that we are seeing the rise of the gig economy, more flexible work arrangements. So this again sort of stands to benefit women. They can operate out of their home, they have flexible working hours. But at the same time, I think that women are less prepared to deal with the challenges that are going to emerge going forward in this future of work. Because again, like you said, when the point comes that we start automating those activities that women are engaged in, then they're going to lose jobs. And women traditionally don't find jobs in the other sectors, the more capital-intensive sectors. And the other key issue really is access to skills. Now, women don't have equal access to skills. And very often they argue that when their jobs get automated, it's the men who take up these jobs. The men will be the ones who will be trained to work on the machines and not women. So I think that in this whole conversation of the future of work, when I talk about the winners and the losers, definitely while there are opportunities for women, at the same time, unless we have the appropriate policy responses, we change the way society thinks about participation of women in economic activities, they are actually going to stand to lose disproportionately from this.
So finally, what are the appropriate responses that governments can take?
So I think the single most important is a universal entitlement to lifelong learning. And when I say this, I don't mean simply about skilling. I think education, schooling, improving the quality of schooling is imperative, because we can have all these skill development programs, but if we're not in fact imparting people the basic foundational skills they require to be able to acquire these higher skills, all of this is going to be meaningless. Also, technology is changing at such a rapid pace that's very hard to predict where jobs are going to be coming from, where people will in fact find jobs. So we have to have the skill of adaptability. And also, as our lifespans become longer, we spend more time working, it's also important that we learn to sort of forget our old skills and then reskill. So there has to be sort of unlearning and then learning again in the job. That's why the universal entitlement to lifelong learning becomes very important. And the second critical issue to my mind is social security for all. Because South Asia is characterized, is dominated by informal work arrangements. The rise of the gig economy that we are seeing here is going to create more informality, because these are again informal work arrangements which are outside the standard employer-employee relationships. Workers don't have health benefits, they're not covered by minimum wages. So I think social security for all, and the idea of a universal labor guarantee, which has been proposed in the ILO's Global Commission report on the future of work, which essentially says that regardless of the nature of contract you have to ensure that all workers have decent working conditions, they have living wages, collective representative voice. So I think if we address these issues, we should be able to protect the marginalized, the poor, women, and those in the informal sector in particular, to bear this transition a little less painfully.
Right. And on that note, thank you very much, Dr. Kapoor.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Do join us for another episode of Expert Insights soon. Thank you.